Right. Hello guys, I'm Victor Botev. I'm the CTO of Iris AI. Thank you so much for inviting me here for this talk. Yeah, today I'm going to be talking, as I was already introduced, about processing scientific content with artificial intelligence. But before I go straight into the topic, maybe a few words about my company, Iris AI. We have been doing this for about 6 years. Our focus was on building software tools for processing large amounts of scientific knowledge, mainly publications, patents, and technical reports, and bring value to our customers, like use cases such as literature reviews, post-market surveillance, regulatory requirements when it comes to pharmaceuticals, for example, drug repurposing, and so forth and so forth. I'll show you a few of the use cases a bit further in the presentation. So the company, it was founded in 2015, by me, Anita, Jacobo, and Maria. So the four of us, we have very different backgrounds. So I'm more the technical guy. I had some background in machine learning, while the other three guys are more business people. And our goal was to build tools towards a research assistant software that can help each of the researchers around the world get to do actual research and not focus that much on what's been published unless that's necessary for their particular work, but basically to ease the issue of information overload and hidden information within IP papers such as patents in general. A few words about the tools that we provide to our clients. So the first tool that we built, that was with the start of the company, our first focus was to help with literature exploration. So we built a tool that allows researchers to explore the repositories of scientific papers and patents using natural language. Because one of the issues a lot of people have when it comes to the regular keyword search engines is that the terminology changes a lot in research, and when it comes to multidisciplinary research, the same things could be called with different names and so forth. And it is much easier also to get into a new field by explaining your problem in your natural language than trying to find the right keywords and spending a lot of time curating lists with trial and error. So that was our first focus. I'll talk more about this tool later on, and in general, all of the tools. So the second tool is what we call advanced literature list refinement. So more or less, even with using the natural language, when you search for articles, you will still get quite a good amount of articles, probably depending on the area, on the topic, but it could be very easily 200 to 300 to 400 articles, depending on how general your question is. And that is still not an amount of article that you can read or process in a short time frame. So what we thought is that we should provide smart filters in order for users to be able to even more narrow down and focus towards building a short list of articles that are very relevant to their problem. This kind of tool has three different directions. So one direction is we analyze the corpus of results and give the users what we call highly ranked words, or words that are very useful when you do keyword search in this particular set that you get from the exploration tool. Because those words will cut the corpus into kind of even parts. So in this way, you'll be able to cut out a big chunk and not just get one or two articles. That helps a lot in the filtering. Second part is machine topic models. And third part is what we call contextual filtering, meaning that, yeah, you provided your input in your natural language, but you also might sometimes have criteria that are not easily describable in one word or are not captured in a topic. So you want to continue in natural language, explain what additionally you want to get. So maybe you want all articles that are related to a particular drug, but later on you want also those articles purpose to a particular disease as well. So you can then add this context filter based on diseases. I'll give also examples in the use cases as well. The third tool in the suite is about extraction of experiments. So we have quite a lot of clients that are interested in, especially in the patent space, to extract what experiments have been done in a patent. And so more or less all the key data points about those experiments. So for example, there's a patent that compares, that presents some new technique for producing new materials, and they have comparison between different materials, between different processes and stuff like that. And they want us to go through the patent, extract the different key data points and organize them in experiments, so that later on they can directly go and replicate the experiments or compare to data that they have coming from their lab and so forth. So I think this is one of the very innovative solutions that we provide. And the fourth one is about summarization. So basically, there are three categories of summaries that are interesting for our clients. That's single document summarization, which is very classical type of summarization. So you have an article or a patent and you want to get the objective summary more or less, because yeah, abstracts are not always objective summaries. Sometimes they omit some of the information, kind of to advertise the work. And patent descriptions are definitely omitting a lot of information. So yeah, we want to get like the objective summary. And then where things become even more interesting is like multi-document summarizations. So that means you have like a bunch of documents and you want to know what is the objective summary of these documents and what people are talking about in there. There are some limitations to multi-document summarization. I mean, just dropping a random documents would not really produce good results. So those documents have to still be kind of on a similar topic and stuff like that. But in most of the use cases we have, that's actually the case. And the third thing that is something that we are currently co-developing with clients is what we call tailored summaries. It means you want the summary of a particular article, but not the objective one. You kind of want to know maybe what this article is. So yeah, if you can imagine that in an article, people are talking about, let's say, different drugs that help for a particular disease, and you're interested in a summary only about a particular drug or only about a particular disease when there are multiple of those. So you can give this additional context and the machine can produce you a summary that is tailored towards that context. So this is more or less the tool suite that we have. So literature exploration, advanced literature list refinement, extraction of experiments, and document summaries. This is more or less what we do. The technology behind could be similar in between some of those, but there are some nuances and also there are some new aspects as well for each of the tools. But as I said, yeah, I'll give a bit more insights on that further in the presentation. So now I want to present you three different use cases that come from clients and which we are actually working today. So one of the case studies that we have here is about drug repurposing. So basically a company has a particular drug or there is a particular disease that has to be kind of addressed quickly. And in this case, FDA's approval take years, so people want to find other drugs that actually can be repurposed for that particular disease. Yeah, in order for people to get inspired and get more information about the drugs, serendipitous exploration of the existing literature is one of the key factors that our client have identified. So in this case, they use our content-based search, where in natural language, they kind of explain what they're trying to solve. And then they apply context filters. In many medical domains, there is something that's called PICO search, which is related to population, intent, outcomes of the particular research. So they want to specify additionally, okay, I'm interested in this particular disease, but I want all the drugs to actually target this particular group of the population, and so forth and so forth. But that's the starting point. So people explore here, find related articles, but what they are sometimes restricted to is also what we call entities and concrete data points. So because the content-based search and the context filters, they work with natural language, but sometimes people want to say concrete numerical values. So then what we do is we extract those entities of interest from the text and we'll quantify them. So at the end of the day, we have quantified entities. And you can think of, for example, age group could be a quantified entity when you combine it with age group 55 to 60, let's say. That's a quantified entity in our terms. And by extracting those key points and linking them to the articles, we can allow the client to actually search not only by the context, but also to specify restrictions like, yeah, I want the age group to be in between these and these years, and then the results could be filtered in this particular way. So all of the smart filters have been applied in here. So it means that those highly ranked words that I mentioned in this case were used quite rapidly. So for example, when you get the result set, you can see that a certain version of the disease or a certain adverse effect is pretty dominant in half of the corpus and not so dominant in the other half. So then that's an interesting word which you can decide if you want to include into your literature review or not. And finally, so the final step in this particular use case was that after they narrowed down the list of articles, they wanted all the clinical data to be extracted into a database. And that's where this extraction tool that I talked about comes into place. So they provide a concrete data layout in which they want the data to be stored, more or less the entities of interest that they want. And the extraction tool goes through the results and extracts that data and groups it into different experiments and stores it into the database. So yeah, so that's a concrete use case that we're working even today with this particular client for finding a drug for a concrete medical situation. And this project is funded by the Canadian government, as is mentioned here. Another use case is the competitor IP analysis. Yeah, so basically in here, we have a company that has an IP department that does surveillance of what patents come out about their particular materials and about the methods in which they're produced and about the evaluation technology that is used or the evaluation methods. And they use this information either to test their materials and see where are they based on this new evaluation metric maybe, or to compare in the same kind of environment with their own materials and so forth, or to reproduce some of the experiments. And what they do on a daily basis is that they more or less have this team finding those patterns, then after that, going through the patterns, extracting the information about each and every experiment. They have a big data layout of information about the material itself, like the compounds that compose it, about the processes that are used, and about the mechanical properties of the materials. And I'm talking here about data layout of about 100 to 200 entities of interest, and they go through the pattern and try to fit in the data into this layout, and then produce Excel sheets that they share with the labs where they analyze them and do experiments. This kind of work takes them usually about 2 months to do that for a particular case, and we can automate that and do it much faster. As I said, exactly here the extraction tool is directly applied. So for this particular case, the main tool that has been used is the extraction tool. So the machine goes through the text, finds the entities of interest in the text, in the tables and graphs, then links them together and does disambiguation to figure out which of these interesting quantified entities or quantities or entities correspond to a particular experiment, and then reports that into the database with the respective data layout. Yeah, so as you can imagine, like this is a really radical time saving for this particular team, because yeah, like the extraction of this information is just big, like comes in few minutes, depending of course on the size of the pattern, but the bigger the pattern, also the manual time will be bigger as well. And the third the third use case that I'll show, and I'll go a bit quicker through that, is the pharmacovigilance. So here basically the client, yeah, they spend quite a lot of time in sending regulatory following regulatory requirements. So whenever they produce new drugs and stuff like that, they need to constantly follow up on adverse effects that are reported for those particular drugs, and they need to have some sort of system that actually can monitor that, search for those adverse effects. And here the good thing in our system is that we are able to provide them with this smart filtering system where you can provide context descriptions of the adverse effects. You can also add entities of interest, and you can add those quantified entities as well. That helps them a lot to make sure that really all the articles related to those adverse effects are there. And also what they want is they want this process to be kind of on repeat and notify them whenever new articles appear in the repositories of articles and patents that we are monitoring, so that at any point in time they know what's happening. And the ideal thing is if we can do also automatic report generation. That is something that we are working a bit with clients at this stage, so that's not final product yet, because in those kind of regulatory forms, in many cases, there is kind of a little bit of tailored summary that needs to be written in. And as I said, our tailored summary technology is still in development. But this is more or less the use case in here. And yeah, so these are the 3 use cases that I'm going to show you today. But this is not these are not the only use cases. So we have in the company clients in different domains, like the big clients currently are mainly in drug repurposing and in material science. But the technology as it is can be used horizontally on different types of clients as well. All right, so a little bit about the technology itself. So the technology, yeah, I mean, we have the search technology that I'm going to be talking about, and the filter. In the filtering, they kind of use the similar type of machine learning algorithms and similar type of engineering solution. We'll talk a little bit about text analysis in general and corpus analysis, the extraction, summarization. The two last parts that are automate and report, I would not talk about that because it's not much related to machine learning. This is more about an engineering solution of how to basically efficiently store the state of the search through which a client has went through and produce reproduce the same kind of search process or filtering process again and again, and notify the user about that. And the report is about providing a report template that's actually filled in with the extracted data or the summarization. But yeah, I'll skip those two. So going now a little bit more in details about the search and filtering. Yeah, so I said in the beginning, the search and filtering for us, especially the context filtering, is based on what we call content-based recommendation engine. So for that, we do not use any external indexes, impact factors, or author indexes and stuff like that, or any indexes related to the metadata of the article. Instead, this content-based recommendation engine is focused on finding new content that is similar to the content that you have provided. So if you ask for a particular problem to be solved, the machine will give you articles that talk about solving the same type of problem. So a little bit about the technology inside. So yeah, here are a few of most of the steps that are kind of used inside the content-based recommendation engine. So we talk about key concept extraction. So that the thing about key concept extraction is that essentially content-based recommendation engines could also work on the full text. They could work directly with the abstract of an article or with the problem definition or with the full article. But the problem is that when you then go to step 2 and build an embedding space of these concepts, a lot of the tokens or words that are in the full text, they do not bear much information and can create a lot of noise in the kind of latter part of the steps in the system. So that's why we kind of want to filter that out. So it's not that much about selecting the best keywords here. It's about more or less reducing the noise because yeah, we're not interested in how often some prepositions are used or stuff like that because they don't bear that much information. We're more interested in the concepts that bear more meaning. So that's why we try to kind of filter that out from the initial input and as well from all of the documents that we have in the repositories, because those are also pre-processed and fingerprinted. So after we select those key concepts, which is based on key tokens extraction, topic models, and contextual synonyms enrichment. So we form this fingerprint that is essentially, you can think of it something like a matrix where each row in the matrix is the key concept that has been selected from the input text. and each of the columns is actually the dimension in the embedding space. And then we use this fingerprinting or fingerprints to compute similarity between the documents. And for that particular step, the document similarity matching, we have actually published a paper back in 2017 for kind of how you can do that effectively. We do that. So all the documents in our repositories are pre-processed, so they are fingerprinted. But the document similarity matching is very much done on the fly. So we can compute, I think, about 300,000 similarity comparisons, for about 10 seconds, and that is getting me to the next point, the smart indexing. So in order to not need to compute that for all the articles in the repositories, which in our current case is about 60 million, we try to separate or split the repository content into different machine learned semantic topics. And when we are doing a search and finding the similar documents before we apply the similarity matching, we identify the area in this repository which actually is interesting to the user. And I would say that it is actually a quite general area. So usually in the range of 100,000 to 300,000 documents. So there is no risk that the client will miss something that is not in this area. Usually, and then we can apply the document similarity matching on the fly, because why is important to be on the fly? Because the user can provide any type of natural text, and then you have to find the place in the embedding space where this text belongs to. And the more similarity matches you can do quickly, the better the answer will be at the end. So this is kind of the steps for the search itself. So when it comes to context filtering, what happens is that we do similar type of similarity matching and ranking as we do for the regular search, but this time we do it on the results from the search. So for example, let's say you have searched for a particular drug and what are its adverse effects, and you receive 300 articles. Then with the context filters, you might say, but I'm actually interested in these 3 adverse effects. So you can have 3 context filters describing each adverse effect, and you get now a new similarity score for each of the context filters. So in this case, what a person can do with this context filtering is that basically you get a rank between 0 and 100 about how relevant are the articles to a particular adverse effect in this case, and you'll be able to sort them or filter based on maybe you want to look only on the positive sides or those that talk about the adverse effect. So you use like every article that is above 50% relevance, or you might want to use it as a negative filter and say, I actually want the articles that are not related to this particular adverse effect. So then you lower the filter down. And that's more or less how the result ranking is happening. So basically, after the result of the search, you get a list of the articles. Each of the article will be tagged with the relevance score from 0 to 100 to the original problem statement. And when you apply a context filter, you get next to it a new column that is actually giving you the score for each contextual filter, and you can then filter or sort the result set. Yes, so this is on the search and filtering. Corpus text analysis. As I said, besides the context filters, in the filtering, there is a possibility to filter by keywords. But in this case, we also try to facilitate the search queries that the users are doing by telling them which words are good keywords for doing an efficient search. So the machine automatically identifies what we call highly ranked words, meaning that those words will split the corpus into more or less even parts. And in this way, the search will be quite quick. So by using, if you know that some of those highly ranked words you want or you don't want, you'll be able to limit your result set quite quickly. If you can't figure, of course, you can use any keywords that you're interested in. The second thing, and that comes a little bit to what I said about entities of interest, is representation learning. So when you have a concrete corpus of documents, what we're doing is we're trying to learn all the different representations of a particular entity of interest. So example could be a compound. Like a compound can be named, so it can have a common name. It can have also a chemical formula. It can, and this chemical formula also can be in different notation and so forth. And what we want to learn is that all of these, like the formula, certain chemical notation, and the name, that the machine knows that this means the same thing. And for that, we use kind of the embedding spaces that we have built. Like one of the core technology of Iris AI is related to building embedding spaces. And the key there is, like, after you train a general embedding model, to find a way to first focus it on concrete domain, and second, to inject knowledge from external sources. And I think that those are the two things at which we are good at. So we are able to fine-tune the model after a pre-trained model on general scientific corpus to focus more on the concrete domain, but still remain quite knowledgeable for other domains. And second, to inject the knowledge coming from external sources, such as, let's say, databases for chemical elements like PubChem, for example. So when you know that certain elements are contextually similar and they have to be next to each other, you need to find a technique in which to kind of rearrange a little bit the learned vector space, but still keep the how to say, the fabric of the space, so that the machine learning model doesn't get confused by that operation. Yeah, so the representation learning is quite important for the tasks for the extraction, and as well for filtering based on quantified entities. I mean, the second part here, identifying those entities of interest. So once you have representation learned from a concrete concept, then you just need to figure out how or which concept actually relates to the entities that the user is talking about. So more or less, we learn in a corpus what are the interesting entities or highly ranked words. Then after that, we find their representations. And after we do that, we allow the user to select which are interesting, so that we can find them, extract them, and do other stuff with that. Another thing that we do in the corpus text analysis is that if those entities of interest happen to have abbreviations, so in the representation learning, we find that certain interesting word or phrase has an abbreviation, we try to automatically expand them so that we are able to use simpler models when it comes to analyzing the text. And we also do topic models as well. I can see that I'm going a little bit over time, so I will try to speed up a little bit so that there's some time for questions. So yeah, we have also extraction of experiments, what I talked about. So in the pipeline for finding experiments, there's all those three kind of actions that we do. They're related to different machine learning aspects. So one is data extraction from graphs and tables. Here we have models that locate the tables and graphs in PDF documents, and then models that actually extract the data. The thing is that, I don't know if you have worked with PDFs a lot, you know that this format is not very structured and might be quite difficult to just use the information that comes from the parser. So yeah, instead of that, we kind of use image processing here to be able to locate all the text boxes that are related to a table or graph. And after those are located, then we have to figure out if they're columns or rows in terms of tables, where they lie, so that we can extract the data properly. And if they're graphs, to figure out where are the kind of the points of interest in the graph and how they relate to the different axes. So yeah, for that, we also use image processing algorithms. Then going to data extraction from text, I mean, all of the techniques we discussed before are kind of used here to identify entities and quantities and build those quantified entities. And finally, the final step is to systematize the data. So more or less to identify which are the experiments and disambiguate them, and to link all the data correctly between each other, more or less. So to figure out that this quantified entity is related to this experiment, to this process, to this mechanical property. Yes, and final words on document summarization. So for summarization, we currently use recurrent neural networks to produce abstractive summaries, but they're still based on the vocabulary and the information within the text. So we have a generator network that has a language model and can generate any type of text, but we kind of bias it towards sentences that are interesting within the text, so that whenever it starts producing a sentence, it looks at the vocabulary of those interesting sentences, use some of the words from there, fills in the gaps in between so that this sounds like a real sentence, and then it moves to the next step. But here, since we want to kind of cover the information in the whole text with a compressed amount of sentences, the idea is that in every next sentence, the ranking changes. So the information that has been used in the previous sentence kind of drags or deprioritizes sentences. And in this way, we're able to produce summaries, objective summaries that cover the whole text and still sound like an abstractive summarization. So because we fill in the gaps with the corresponding English words, so that it sounds like a normal text. Yes, and I think probably I'll stop here, because I hope that there will be some questions from you guys, or things that you want to discuss. And I actually have only the 17 minutes after this talk, and then I have to move to another meeting.